What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bev Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian,
I'm Brian.
and we are the Bev Boys, as always. Welcome back to the show. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Today, we got a few topics on the docket today. But first, I will admit I jumped the gun a little bit today, partly because this drink is just so fabulous, and partly because I messed up our recording time. But I got a Ghost iced tea lemonade. Tough to go wrong here. Delicious as always. Picked it up at a gas station here in Memphis. So I don't know if you've ever been, but this is my first time. So
It's I've heard some not great things about Memphis. Always
yeah,
try to give a city a chance, but I've also heard it's like fairly rough.
yeah. I mean, I'm close. I think we're close to the university right now.
Uh,
Obviously, I went in broad daylight, so I wasn't really worried. It was like 6 a.m. when I walked over to this gas station. I will say, I do think that out of all the cities that we've been to, I feel like everyone is very quick to stereotype cities from like a quick bad experience, which is most things in life. Like I
yeah,
heard that we went to St. Paul earlier this year, and people were like, "Oh, dude, St. Paul, super sketchy," and I was like, "Really?" Like, and don't get me wrong, like there was a good amount of homeless people, but
it's not bad.
I never felt like endangered. Like tweaker
No,
homeless people, that's like stock for any city over a couple 100,000 people. Like any like decent sized city is gonna have that.
yeah, that's always going to be there, and like especially like I don't know, St. Paul gets like a bad rap for like being dangerous or sketchy, and it's like, dude, there's 1,000 coffee shops and like breakfast spots littering the city. Like
Right.
that's what you're worried about. You're not like there's I I lived there for fuck, 7 years, and I like even when I lived in like a pretty crappy neighborhood in like a glorified like kind of like what used to be like a trap house, like it wasn't terrible. Like you could still like we would go out at night, no issues. We're longboarding in the streets, and like I don't know, I never had like true problems. Like I never felt like I'd be like looking over my shoulder. Like
Yeah.
especially in cities where like nightlife is prominent, I feel like there's not as much because it's like they want people to go out. They want you to be out. And like there's so many parks and stuff that those typical things happen. Like when we went to Lexington, Kentucky, like everyone's like, "Oh, it's kind of it's a shithole." And I'm like we were walking around, I'm like, "Okay, like there's a couple like streets where it's like this could be cleaned up, like but nothing was like terrible."
Yeah. I feel like that's anywhere.
Yeah.
And I guess it's all about like what you're used to too. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm saying this like I grew up in a very like I people don't even believe me when I tell them I grew up in a outside of town where we had like 160 people. So like I'm used to like nothing going on. And
Yeah.
the closest like big city was like an hour away, and that was even like people still don't even consider that like a city because it's like less than people from like big cities are like, oh, like 100,000 people, that's nothing. But I really don't. And the same thing, we went to Toledo earlier this year, and I will say like that one, I would say like I wouldn't even call it like sketchy. I would just say like there's more people out later at night, and it was a little more rowdy. But I don't think
Yeah. There's
I don't know
nightlife.
when there's a lot of people. I feel like I would be less concerned because there's more people. Like if something does happen, like
Like, yeah,
that's
you're less
witnesses.
likely to see something happen because there's so many people. It's like, well, no one's gonna do anything bad because they all know they're gonna probably get caught.
Right. It's when it's just you and then some other random stranger down the street, and you like
Yeah,
that's maybe like it's. But yeah, I digress. People are quick to stereotype, so I'm not gonna. I'm only gonna be here for a few days, but I'm gonna give Memphis a chance. So
it's
far
like
so good.
Detroit gets a bad rap too, and honestly, like I think it was when I went there, like both times, I was like, it's kind of a pretty cool city. Like there's great food, like people were
Mhm.
super chill. Like it was just more of like a blue collar city. Like that's
Right.
all it really was. It's like a lot of working class families and shit like that. Like people don't realize it, and they're just like, oh, it's not great because what they've like known or like been told about is like, oh, it's not great. It's like,
Right.
well, the city's done a lot of work to like make it nice, and they've done a really good job of like getting out of like kind of the hole that like some of the motor plants like closing like
Hmm.
brought to it. I personally, I really liked it. Like Chicago gets a bad rap, and I love Chicago.
Right. Like if you're gonna say that about a city like Detroit, you have to say it about every other like big city because
Yeah,
every like it's just a numbers game at some point. Like you can't have a city of multi millions of people and not expect for any of it to be bad. And maybe it's not
yeah,
even that bad. It's just relative to the really nice stuff that you're gonna see, it
yeah.
looks bad. You
And
know?
everything's gonna have pockets too, where it's like it's not as nice or whatever. But like that's again numbers game, numbers game, numbers game. Same thing. Like you're training athletes. You're probably gonna have one or two that aren't as good as the rest. But that doesn't mean the entirety of the team is bad.
Yeah, just be the whole team shit.
Yeah. So use that in perspective.
Yeah.
I didn't jump the gun because I was an idiot and we're in different time zones, or I thought we were. So I was like, oh, we're going at 8 a.m. your time. So I didn't crack mine open,
Oh, nice.
but I have the White Haze Rain, which I haven't done a review, but you've done a review.
Yep.
Um, Everyone's jumping on the White Monster bandwagon. I think that's like the big thing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I believe you did the first form. Rise had one. Um, Honestly, I think like the OG Ghost is kind of like a grapefruity bubblegum type of flavor. So I think they kind of hopped on the train too. But Rain, this one I'm interested in because Rain's owned by Monster. Like parent company is Monster. If someone's going to be super, super close, it's probably going to be them. So
Hmm.
can look sick. I like the blue and the white. Obviously, the blue tab on top. Let's pop some top, talk some shop. But I got a little vapor here. First sip, one sip. Everybody knows the rules. Yep, one sip. Everybody knows the rules. Yep, one sip. Everybody knows the rules. One sip. Holy shit. If there's one of them out there that's so close to White Monster, it's this.
Gotta be.
I'm not saying that's going to influence my review, but it really kind of tastes like a White Monster with just triple caffeine.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
I think Rain did a pretty good job on that to start. But last week weren't able to record. I was in New Orleans. Went to NatCon. Um,
How was that?
it's not bad. New Orleans is a tough city to kind of do a conference, and not because the city's not great. There's fantastic food. That's number one. Pretty good location itself, and there's always stuff to do, which I like. But there's not too much to do that pulls everybody out of the conference. So from a vendor perspective, it's great for us, and from a coaching perspective, it is nice because you kind of spend a lot more time with the other coaches and get a chance to kind of talk and that kind of thing. The only thing that stinks is they always do it in the same hotel. And this hotel is 15 up and down escalators to get to where you need to go. So it's super convoluted.
Mm.
Couple good speakers. Eric Hernandez from UNC, he did a great rehab kind of talk. Eric Kramer had a keynote speaker that was really good. So there was a couple good ones out there. I hopped into the special interest group for track and field, which was a little different, but kind of a fun time. Got to talk some sprinting and things like that. A lot of track coaches versus just S&C coaches, which is a little different. I don't know if I was expecting that, especially at National Strength and Conditioning Convention. Um, but overall, it was a good time. And we went to a Michelin listed restaurant. I don't know if they have a star or not, but food was fantastic. My entree came out a little dry, but all of the appetizers were unreal. So had some good food, good times with people. Obviously got to connect with some colleagues and some people that we know around the industry, which was really nice. Yeah, overall, I think it was pretty good. But there's some news that's kind of going out based off of what was going on there. Um, in kind of the tech space and world, I there's rumors flying around, and OVR kind of confirmed one of them for people, and now it's become this hot topic. I don't know if you saw this, but OVR released a force plate, or they are releasing a force plate, $1,500 for a force plate, I might add, and sports performance has erupted in two dogmatic tribalistic parties one party is, I hate this, this is stupid, everyone's going to try and buy this, and they don't have the education for it, blah, blah, blah. And the other party is, this is fantastic. You guys were kind of, gatekeeping the education, and the best way to to learn something is to use it, and now it's affordable and it's going to be able to be used. And then there's that little pocket in the middle who's like, this is great because everyone's going to realize it's not the end all be all because you're going to buy it and you're going to realize it's just a really fancy jump mat. Um, but I'm kind of excited to hear your take on it. I mean, I know you use force plates fairly often when you're kind of in season. So when you're kind of thinking about this, like, what's your opinions on the affordability aspect versus like the education and it, taking precedent versus just having the tool?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's great that it's becoming more available. Obviously, that's I don't know about Hawken, but I know like Vault is around like I think it's like 20 G's just for force plates, and then you obviously have to pay the software subscription. So it's a hefty amount. Not everyone can afford it. I've been lucky to be able to use them the past couple of years, and I think it's overall good because, and I will say with the education part, like I had never before you use force plates, you've never used force plates. So, and I'm a big believer in like actually just doing is probably the best way to learn about something. Like obviously you can read and research about technology and whatnot, but you're never really going to know like how it works, how to utilize it until you've worked with it for a little bit. So I think that's a really good thing because people can get that exposure at a lot lower entry point from a cost perspective, which I think is good. I do agree with like what you said with that little pocket. Like people will realize like yes, it can be a useful tool, but it's not like it isn't going to be the difference between like you running a successful program and not running a successful program. Like it might give you some more insights to help you inform training decisions, which I think is great. And some people take that a little bit further than other people. Some people essentially use it more to look at like readiness and trends and see how the athlete is reacting to the training and responding to the training versus other people may be more so using it in a way to change their training based off what they see on those metrics. And I'm not here to say which, if either way is right or wrong. I think those are both like valid ways to use it if you have a good, solid reasoning behind it. But overall, I think it's good. The education piece, like, there's so much stuff out there for little to no cost now about force plate education, and I'm assuming obviously like OVR. I've never used any of their products, but I've heard really good things about them. And the main thing is like they're pretty damn affordable. Like all their products are really affordable compared to competitors, and they seem to be just as valid, just as reliable as the kind of those gold standards when you talk about like their velocity, their VBT unit. You can stack that up against a Vitruve, a GymAware, um, any of those gold standards, and it can be pretty similar, if not the exact same. So I think that's good. Won't really have a big concern about it being like, oh, it's a $1,500 force plate. Why? Like, where's the disconnect? Why is Vol charging $20,000? Which I think that's going to be interesting because if it is, just as good, and I'm assuming they're not going to put a product out there that they're not confident in and is going to be good quality. I think that's going to be the big thing. And are people going to start going away from things like Vald? Now, Vald does have a bit of an edge specifically because they have their like Vald, it's kind of like Apple. They have their own like ecosystem. They have timing gates now. They have the Dynamo. They have the Nord board. You can do a ton with the force plates and you can get all of that in one ecosystem with their Vald hub. Now, to counter that argument, you can also essentially, if you can get the raw data from all that stuff, you can pipe it into a dashboard using AI now on your own. So that's not really maybe as much of a concern. Um, I don't know much about Hawken. I know some people I've talked to are a big fan of them, but I believe they only make force plates. I think it's just kind of their main thing is force plates. Um, so I think that'll be interesting from like just a competitive market standpoint. But overall, I think it's a good thing because, like I said, lower cost of entry. People are going to be able to access that piece of technology for a lot less money, which means especially like smaller schools with like lower budgets, maybe even more like private facilities that are just getting started that like want to have, some technology, which I think is big in the private space because people are, coming to you paying out of pocket. Like technology is a big, big sell. I know, like especially in certain sports. Um, it'll be interesting though. I don't really see it as a bad thing though. Obviously, like you can use it in bad ways, but like people are using it probably in bad ways right now for just way more money. So I don't see the reason to kind of gatekeep because it's also I feel like a lot of times people will you won't be able to get that experience until you're at like a bigger institution or organization, which I think is good because now, I think there are a lot of really good coaches at these smaller schools with lesser budgets. And now they're going to get access to that. They don't feel like they have to like, oh, like I need to leave a job just to experience more, technology. Not that people are leaving jobs for that reason, but it's definitely, it could be a factor. So I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like when you get onto the front of number one, the affordability piece, I think there's a lot of confusion, a lot, especially when people are first getting into the industry. You think the largest school that has the most resources typically just has the best people 24/7. And that's not to say that, a lot of these schools don't have great coaches in them, but I don't want to conflate great coaching with having a lot of resources. And I think that's the big difference. And a lot of these fantastic schools that are smaller with impeccable coaching staff who's probably done a lot more with a lot less. Now they have the opportunity to use this, and obviously like making sure it's not the end all be all. It's not going to be the golden ticket item, but having the piece to the puzzle that can contribute and help influence some of the training while not being the marquee piece. If you're training to attain a certain number on that, well, now we kind of put the cart before the horse, and now the whole program becomes how do I only get that versus can this measure the training program that I'm doing is efficacious, in a sense. Um, Now the other piece to it of that puzzle too is, you know, I kind of made this argument yesterday, and we got to get Evan Mills on the show. I think he'd be fantastic because he's ball of energy, lots of opinions, and he'll contradict himself mid sentence because he's going to think while he's talking and go, actually, I don't like that argument anymore. But we were talking yesterday, and my point kind of was, and he agreed with me on it, was, so often it's like, well, they're better because they're a bigger school. And it's like, well, not really. Like, there's so many coaches out there that are at a smaller school, and you can go watch and view for yourself. I honestly encourage everybody who is still getting into it, or even just they're 10 years into their career, go view somebody else's session, pick things up. But it's like you go there and it's way different. It's not what you may have thought just because they have these exponential resources in comparison. You know, lo and behold, like maybe they can't even manage a room by comparison. And I think that's a big difference. And the affordability aspect, and obviously this is a side piece of that argument, but the affordability aspect is gonna level that playing field. And that's, I think it's really good for us. Like we think of competitive markets, we think of like, as much as everybody wants to complain about capitalism or not, like it's a free market. So like the lowest you can bury each other with pricing and try to, get yourself ahead. And that helps a lot of people out. So I think it's going to be overall a good thing. This isn't an ad by any means. I wish it was. So OVR, if you do wish to sponsor a podcast, like you can come to us. We personally like my office mate's he's got the OVR sprints behind me. Um, we've got the Brower. I've got two different Dashers, and he's got OVRs. He bought the OVRs out of his pocket. I bought the Dashers out of mine, and then we had the Browers from the school. So like, we've tested a lot of them, and I think Dasher's really great, but OVR is a little bit more affordable, and it reads on the unit if you don't want to use the app. So that's really nice. Like you don't have a connectivity issue. So I like there's pieces to this, and like new innovations happen, and I think a lot of the people, and I will never hate a coach for making money on the side because they can get hooked up and now they're maybe a partner or whatever it is. But are we conflicting a partnership with, is it a better product? Like, does that pull away from your honest review of it to the fact of like, well, you have a stake in this because you make money from it. So obviously that's the best one. I think looking at it through a fisheye lens and kind of are under a microscope and being like, okay, well, you're getting paid by them. Of course you're going to say it's the best, even to the same extent, like myself included, like I work for Team Builder. Obviously I'm going to tell you it's the best. I still think it's the best. Again, not an ad, wish it was. um, but those pieces play parts into that, and I think there's a difficult piece to understand and kind of diagnose that, and it's going to lead to some rifts. We've already seen a couple good pieces. I think Angus Bradley kind of put it out there, the McDonald's force played out there, and he made a good point, and it literally was. It's good for the industry because it's going to be more attainable, but you got to have the education for it. And I think when you get something like that, it's almost to the same extent as like it's not just the product. You should have the educational portion to it of, when you get in, do they teach you how to use it? What matters? What are you looking for out of this? And as you kind of get that set up, or is it, you just, like if you're going to buy an iPhone, they're like, well, now you have it. Here you go. You do what you want with it. It's not our problem. So I would imagine, like you said, there's low cost affordability options to understand and educate yourself on using different tools now. There's so much out there, and education is extremely abundant. I think it's only going to help improve. The hard part is we talked about this I think 3 episodes ago, and I think the role of sports scientists is going to continue to dissipate. I think now that things are becoming easier to utilize, the data is easier to clean. We have AI to continue to help create and visualize. I don't know if you're gonna need as many people on staff that their entire role is strictly data clean and data visualization and understanding of data, because every coach has to do that now. Which maybe that's a bigger piece to the industry as a whole, but I'd be interested to see, like, I think in 2 to 3 years, like our industry looks a lot different than what it currently is, which is a good and a bad thing. And I know, like the Strong Act, we kind of talked about this and alluded to it a little bit before. I think things like this and things like the Strong Act are very good for the industry as a whole. I think what can be problematic is when people get, maybe this is me being a little tinfoil hat, but I feel like when you get people who are outside of it really involved, it can get really hairy in the situation. You know, at surface level, you look at it and go, okay, you get a government ID for your, we're no longer potentially no longer lumped in with like personal trainers and people who coach up maybe an Orange Theory, and we get our own category. That's great. That should help our, those salaries, those that actually commensurate with experience. Where does that money come from is always a difficult question. And a lot of the times, schools are businesses, whether like people like to believe it or not. Organizations are businesses, whether they like to believe it or not. Where's that money come from? I don't think we're going to start just adding money to salary pools. I think they redistribute salary pools. And I think that would be like a secondary or tertiary effect, which is going to be a little hard for some people. And not a lot of people like to think about it, so they try not to. Of, all right, we have a $300,000 salary pool. That's not going to 350. They're going to say, all right, how about instead of 5 people, we have 4, and everyone gets a bigger share of that 300K. What's your opinions on that when it comes to like the Strong Act?
Not sure if I have a well formulated opinion. Like, I'm in agreement with you that the potential for things to be better if we're in our own separate category is, there is potential there, which is a good thing, obviously. I would think that, like, obviously everyone wants to make more money, but I would think I think me and you think like this, like it's better to make a little less money and have more staff to be able to like spread obviously you're spreading the money amongst more people, but you're also spreading the work and the responsibilities amongst more people, which I think overall is a little bit better. Like, yeah, like you're going to make more money, but you're also going to like work a good amount more and have more responsibilities. I think we're under the opinion that like it's better to like spread that wealth a little bit more to have a little bit more help because you run a better program overall, which I think in turn like at the end of the day will hopefully lead to more money anyway, just because you're doing a better job versus just like let's try to have as the least amount of people as possible and just pay them really really well and expect them to be able to do the work of two people instead of one because that can only go on for so long. Like some people might be able to do that, but I don't think they can go on forever. I don't
I
know. I
think
mean, any time you have more people involved with something, the more chance there is for different perspectives, but there also is more opportunities for things to go off the rails too. I mean, you see this when companies go from like startups to bigger and bigger, and they grow and grow and grow. When it was just the founders and just like the first few employees, things were a lot more, it was a lot more of like an idea meritocracy where everyone's ideas were valued the same. And then as companies tend to grow, they get a little bit more bureaucratic oftentimes. And I was actually just listening to I think it was a book that you recommended to me. It's called The Geek Way, or someone recommended. Yeah, it was you recommended to me. It was basically like a lot of people will make decisions based on like these. I think they had an acronym for it. It was called HIPPO, highest employees, highest paid person's opinion, and that's who decides. When oftentimes that's not always the best opinion. So anytime there's more people involved, there's obviously more opportunity for things to be better, but there's also more risk for things to go off the rails. So I don't know, man. I don't have a solid opinion on it as of now.
yeah, it's really hard, and I think it comes from a really good place. Like the senator from Utah, like had been a strength coach. He understands like what it's like to be in this role, which I think is huge. A little bit of skin in the game goes a long way. Even if he's not doing it to the same extent, he can look back and be like, that was tough. Like I know how much work it was. I think that they should be paid better. And then, but there's got to be, at some point, it's almost like maybe there's like bylaws of like, you can't have exponential firings. And I think people will always find ways around that. But there's just so much that could, the more people, like you said, the more people that get involved, the harder it can be to keep the clear eyes, full heart, can't lose mentality, which gets tough. But I think that kind of like leads to, I know we're kind of idea hopping here, but you know, another conversation I had over the past couple of days was the skin in the game conversation. Um, and I think this might be like a pretty hot topic, and it might stir some feathers here. But it gets really tough for me to hear, you know, if I'm an investment banker, right, and we look at it this way, and you're an artist, but you're going to tell me how you think the finance world should be ran. It's really hard for me to listen because you don't have skin in the game, right? Same thing as if flip side, and I was like, that's that's shitty art. That art so this is how it should be. I don't have skin in the game. I was talking again with Evan. Got to get this guy on here. He's a dog, but we were talking about this, and there's a lot of vice. I think both parties are to blame in this situation, but it's like there's a lot of private coaches who tell you how you should train a team. A lot of team sport S&Cs, whether it be professional, club, collegiate, where they're going to tell you how you should run an individual, or even like through those levels. Like I wouldn't run that NFL team this way. I would do it this way. It's like you don't have skin in that game, so it's really hard for you to you're not an unbiased third party opinion, because at some point maybe you want to break into that. Number one, and number two, it's such a different atmosphere, environment. The context is completely different. It's so difficult, and it's really easy to sit, be the man outside the arena and sit there and say like, that's how you should fight. You know what I mean? The armchair quarterback kind of mentality in that aspect of, it's always somebody else's fault, or like you should never do that. It's like, well, you don't really know. It's like the same thing when we talk about social media of like when someone posts something, that could be, shout out Rooney. Everything's good till it isn't. Everything sucks till it doesn't. We don't know the full context of the situation, and it's so difficult to sit there. But we get so dogmatic in there in of that. Why would you ever do that? What is your like when I say that and I kind of put that idea out there? Like, where does your brain go to on that front of, where do you lay on that? Do you feel like you kind of get in that habit sometimes too? And like, how do you like fight that? And I don't know. There's so much to it.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought this up because this is like I would say one of my like bigger struggles, like as a coach, or even just like in general, is like you've like I've been really lucky to be around like a lot of really good coaches. So like oftentimes I'll find myself thinking about like what I'm doing and like comparing it to them and I'm like, oh, this like doesn't seem like as good or it's different. And I think you can drive yourself I know you can drive yourself crazy because I have drove myself crazy about like, okay, comparing yourself to someone in some situation and not realizing that like your context is a lot different. Now, it's not to say that you need to let yourself off the hook and not like take care of your business because that's obviously what you need to do. But I think it's a lot of times you can look on social media and like you see people, whatever it's football, private sector, basketball, anything, and you can be like, damn, like that doesn't look, it's almost like they don't even, it can be the same job, but like they can look like two completely different things and they can both be a job well done, if that makes sense. And I think that's one of the most like it can be the most frustrating, but also like the coolest thing about this field is like there's not one like blueprint way to do things. It's all based off like the context of the team and the environment, the resources, just like the situation you're in as a whole. So I think it's important, and I think that's a really good like reason why it's good to like keep in touch with people that you've worked with before. Obviously, just because like we keep in touch because we do this and we're just like we're friends. We would do it even if I was like, hey, I want to fucking be a real estate agent. We'd still keep in touch. But like I'm like as I get further removed from like Elon, like my job looks different. I think it's still important to like seek advice and like what you guys are doing because yeah, it's different. I'm not going to be able to blatantly let's just blindly apply it to my context, but there can be some nuggets in there, and I think that's where you kind of have to have just some feel about like knowing the difference between like okay, what can I apply and what's just maybe like okay, that's definitely good for what you're doing, but it doesn't really fit into my context. Like because if I tried to take everything that I used to do even at Elon or even like last year and try to just apply that to what I'm doing now, it'd be like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Like it just wouldn't work. And it's not to say that those things are bad. It just isn't the best thing for my situation. And if you're just gonna like blatantly apply that, like that just means you're not willing to adapt to your context. And you don't need to feel like bad because it looks different. That's just you adapting as a coach and doing your job. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's something that I know if I'm like struggle with that sometimes, I know that a lot of other people probably do too. I'm just.
It's I think we all struggle with it, probably more than we would like to admit. And I catch myself doing it all the time where you see something, you're like, I'd never do that. Why would you do that? But then like you put yourself in that shoe, it's like maybe it is a difference of resources and resources doesn't have to mean just like money and equipment. It's like time,
Hmm.
manpower, all these different varieties of aspects of the dynamic with the sports coaches and those kinds of staffs. Like all of those are so different. I think it's so distinctly different that you can listen and want to try to observe to try and like see if there's anything that can be applicable to yours. And this isn't to get on a high horse. Like I said, I fall victim to this all the time. The more times than not, even when we just kind of sit there and talk about stuff, it's just something that you have to kind of, I think, we talk about like the preacher, the prosecutor, and the scientist and the politician becoming the scientist in this aspect and like observing, learning, trying to see what you can take from it versus just immediately falling into one of those other three buckets and like picking it apart and trying to find problems with it or preaching that's not the way, your way is better, whatever it may be. There's so much to it that it gets really tough, you know, to kind of understand and sit there. And you can, you know, have fun and be like, oh, that's stupid. I'd never do that. But it's like, and then when you kind of sit there and look at it, you're like, actually, this is kind of a good piece. Ask the questions and kind of learn. Um, which kind of going back to like NSCA National Convention, I think that's the most valuable piece of those conventions. And I noticed this in like the small interest group or the special interest groups too, when we kind of broke out into those. The most valuable thing about a big conference like that isn't just the speaker. I think that's the big thing. And you really emphasize this when you go to like a smaller conference. Like I think Altus does a pretty good conference too, and they emphasize this aspect to it. CVAPS was great about it. Sportsmith sounds, I didn't get to go to Sportsmith, but it sounds like it's pretty big on that too, of it's the conversations that you're having, whether it be that about the topic and whatever they spoke about or whatever else it is. Like I look forward to like when we go to a conference, like we go out and we have a beer with some of the coaches and you're just having these conversations, you know, what have you been up to? What are your thoughts on this? And you just start having an unprompted conversation. Um, that is so valuable to learn because number one, it's way harder for somebody to be kind of an asshole directly to somebody's face. That veil just drops immediately. But number two, you can ask those more direct questions in a more intimate manner and be able to like understand like the full picture. Um, and I thankfully was able to have a lot of those because it was just a fun time. So I think there's just so much of that that isn't always emphasized, you know, in the field at, you know, an educational level or on a more intimate level between, you know, universities, staffs and everything. So we all want the same thing. We all want to have the best. We all want to be the best. We want to do the best. We can all be in relentless pursuit of that together. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I understand there's only one national champion. There's only, you know, whatever it may be. That doesn't mean you don't have to hate somebody because they're also pursuing the same thing. You don't have to be like blood enemies, especially in sports performance in the most conventional manner. Like whether we like it or not, we can directly contribute to a loss by screwing up, but we don't always directly contribute to a win.
Mm-hmm.
So we're a little bit detached, and for the most part, a lot of the times, I think it's a good thing because it can be more collaborative as an industry as a whole. I don't know if we're there yet.
Yeah, I think there's always a. I feel like imposter syndrome is healthy to an extent, like because it can drive you to. We've talked about this before. It can drive you to keep improving and keep trying to get better. Um, but you can also drive yourself up the wall, thinking like, oh, like thinking that you're like, oh, like, damn, I suck because I don't do things this way, or like I don't know this information, and I don't know. It's like I said, it's a good and a bad thing. I think you got to know, and like I feel like people have told me this a good amount too. I'm sure the same with you, but like there's obviously things you need to be able to do as a coach, um, but don't let that get in the way of like you as a person. Like everyone's gonna coach a little bit different, and like no one's gonna do it like. So I'm gonna say this. It's gonna sound corny, but like there's one thing that you're the best in the world at, and that's like being yourself. No one else can do that better than you. And as corny as that sounds, it's very true. I think like leveraging that while obviously still trying to improve, learn as much as you can, grow over time. Like I think you need to keep that in mind. If nothing else, like keep your sanity at times. Otherwise, like it's not even going to be enjoyable. And like, why are you going to do this job? It's this profession can be like difficult at times as it is. Like you got to find times to you got to
Enjoy
find
it.
yeah, you got to be able to enjoy it, and that comes from, that's different things for different people. Like I feel like for me it's like, okay, like the people you're working with, is it like a good work situation, and like I think that's really the biggest things is like the biggest thing is like who you're working with, who you're working for. For me at least, obviously there's other factors in there, but if you can't find a way to enjoy it and have fun with it, you're probably not going to last very long.
I mean, I 100% agree, and I think that's the last like week and a half has been really great. um, Anyone who's close to, I think, like me, especially like professionally, knows how much like the boys and the hang kind of matters. um, so like for anyone that doesn't know, like Gabe Mason, he's back on staff. Like he came back to us. He came, my son came home. My brother came home.
The
But
goat.
like it's one of those things too where it's yesterday where it's like 5 o'clock. We had we were like, oh, let's go hit some balls and then we'll go play like 9 holes. And it was like me, him, and Demarco, and then my girlfriend came out, played with us, and I'm just sitting there. We're like going up to the last hole, and I'm like, dude, I'm so happy right now. Like, this is sick. We get to train every day after work. We have fun, like elevates your coaching because you have another person that A, you're close with, but B, continues to push you and drive you. And then that drops and you're immediately like hanging out and doing it. Like the people that you work with make so much of a difference. Like it can make up for either stress at work, lack of money, whatever anyone kind of wants to point to as an issue. You work with great people, it can alleviate so much of that, and you realize how quickly like the rest is just details. And I think like you said, like it makes a great point. You make a great point on that of how much that matters. And maybe it's kind of again, I know I'm like flipping between topics constantly right now, but like you look at like a strong act and it's like if you were with like 4 to 5 of your closest friends, right? And you knew that you could get a $10,000 to $15,000 raise, but you would have to sacrifice one of them, would you do it?
No, not even like an easy
Exactly.
decision.
And I feel bad saying this because unfortunately, like maybe it's like the pessimist in me, or some might say a realist, whatever it is, like that's kind of where my head goes a lot right now is like I don't trust enough of, the bureaucratic red tape. I mean, and Elon is we're a different story. So like, I'm not saying this is happening here. I think this is like across the entire industry as a whole, is I think people are going to look to be able to afford that without annihilating the bottom dollar. And that's what I think you'll see. Not every place. I don't think you'll see it at every place, but I think you'll see it at some places. And it's like, like I said, are you willing to sacrifice? And maybe in some cases, like you don't work with the best people, and you're like, all right, yeah, get them out. But, if you're in a great situation, and hopefully the great situation is not just the enclosure of that department, but all around, and they don't want to do that. But if you're in a good situation in that department, but maybe not above you, are you willing to sacrifice one of your friends to get that?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question.
I think there's just so much of that again, we talk about like hyperboles and like theoretical ideas, but like you kind of go back to like the Cobra effect of like it's very well intentioned. How is somebody going to have perverse incentives on that?
Yeah, I time will tell.
And
Time will tell. I'm not
that's
gonna act like I have an answer because
won't
I have
know
no
until we
freaking
really
idea.
won't know until we know.
No, yeah, I got no freaking idea. But yeah, that's good shit. Speaking of the hang, that's I got another like little fun topic. I feel like this come to top of mind just because I've been driving a lot and flying a lot lately, so I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, audiobooks. What are your like top 3 to 5? Like you're on a long car ride, you're on a plane ride. What are you putting on? And maybe it doesn't even have to be a podcast. Are you a music guy, audiobook, podcast? What are you going to?
I'm a big either audiobook or podcast. I like music, don't get me wrong, but
Listen to it all day at work also.
yeah, we listen to music so much. That's what's really tough. So like, I don't love to do music. I also like most of the time if I'm driving, it's usually gonna be like 4 plus hours if I'm doing like a road trip. Music can get a little repetitive, and you almost like kind of like zone out, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh. So I like a podcast or an audiobook because it almost feels like you're in a conversation. Um, I would say one of my all-time favorite podcasts, I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. I think number one, it's I do a little bit of learning from like a production standpoint. Haven't applied a ton of it. I still suck at this, but um like I love the Are You Garbage Boys. That's one of the all-time best podcasts. I think they have a great corner and they hammer it. They're both charismatic, they're great on it. They run it almost like a radio show, almost like old school and like the kitschiness. And it brings me back to a lot of like my childhood when they talk about like some trashy stuff that their family did or anything like that. It's we've all experienced like those pieces. So that one's incredible. I adore that. Um, I think another podcast that I love to listen to is I'm a big fan of it's Whiskey Ginger with Andrew Santino. Um, Another comedian, but Chicago guy. So like when he talks about experiences, it's a lot about how I like similar to how I grew up. His parents were very alike mine, and he gets into a lot of like cool different stories. And I think one thing about comedians that I like a lot is that they're very similar more often than not to like a performance coach. And it's such a weird analogy to make, but they work long hours, late nights, early mornings. They travel a lot for work. They're not always at home, and when they get started, it's lower pay, it's a big grind, and it's all about just trying to learn and improve and get better. And as they make it, it gets easier and they have refined their skill set, and it's always continuous development because they want to be the best. You look at those qualities, and that's very similar. But then they start to talk about like experiences and like the travel that they do and things that they've done. So I just find those like extremely interesting. Um, and then as far as like, so I would say like those are like two podcasts always. Big Caleb Hammer guy, love financial audit. He screams a lot on the show, but he makes good points. I think there's like good nuggets to talk about finances. And I think he's done a great job of like getting himself out of debt and becoming a millionaire, multimillionaire. So I do respect that hustle like a ton. So like those are like if I do like a podcast, I'm like, and they make so many of them, so it's like easy. You throw one on, put another hour on, you're good to go. As far as audiobooks, I'm not big on stories as much as I should be. I just don't like fiction. Um, I'm just not a
Yeah,
fan
me
of it.
neither.
It's like I get the creative aspect, but I would rather, I if it's not something that you and I would typically read, and like we do in like the Bad Boys Book Club, which we have to get our next book
Yeah, we're gonna
review.
get to that.
Um, but like we read pop sci or we read training manuals. Like I love those, but those aren't always an audiobook. Those are more of like I sit down and read.
Hmm.
So if I'm listening to an audiobook, give me historical nonfiction. It's such like the 50-year-old man of like I want to hear about World War II or like the War of 1812 or that kind of shit. But there's like those are like a lot of those stories are so buried. It's just a gold mine of this. We just discovered this new thing that like we kind of found out, and this happened. Well, now we just expand on that thought and dig into it. And those like you just kind of get wrapped into it because a lot of times they read like a nonfiction would, but it's rooted so in reality that you're like, oh my god, like this actually happened. So it's just for me like that just like pulls me into it, and it's just like you start like having your thoughts wonder of like what would it be like if I was there, like probably would have gotten blown up or something, whatever it is. So it's cool. I like those. What about you?
Yeah, yeah. Build off that. One of the best books I feel like I've ever read is the book *Sapiens*. It's a very popular book. Really popular book, but it's basically about like the history of like humans. I know Bill Bryson has another book. It's called like The Short History of Everything. I actually gifted that book to my parents for I think Christmas, and they both really liked it. For me, I feel you. Sometimes music can get a bit redundant with and when you're listening to it all day. So I'm usually either a podcast or an audiobook, and I'll kind of switch back and forth between the two. audiobook, it's and dude, I feel like a big thing about audiobooks is the book can be really good.
And if
The
they're bad,
Dude, yes, yes. If the reader has a voice that you just can't get down with, or like if they just have a whack voice, just something too monotone, it can ruin the book. Like you can like hear all these great things about a book, um, and if the reader's bad, like it can be just a drag to get through that thing. Um, so I definitely agree with you there, but it'll be similar to like the books I'll I'll read. So like kind of like you, I haven't really done a lot of like the history ones. Maybe I need to do that to just kind of like spice it up a little bit. But like I said, I'm listening to the Geek Way right now. The mental models books. I have all of those in hard copy as well as on audiobooks just because I like them so much. Big fan of them. There's a few books that I have that I'll have the physical copy and the audiobook version. It's usually I have that with like a couple of like the Robert Greene books. His books I feel like are you can listen to them over and over and over again and just get a little bit something different out of it each time. Um, Thinking Fast and Slow is another book that I really recommend people either listen to or read. That's a really good one. So stuff like that. I usually won't. One, there's not, to my knowledge, there's not a ton of like training books that are on audio most of the time, and I honestly wouldn't want that.
visualism.
Yeah, like I wouldn't want that anyway. Like I feel like that's something you have to be like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and like dive into this and focus on it entirely. Not something you're gonna do when you're just driving down the highway. Um, Podcast wise, I need to do I need to do a better job of trying to get kind of outside of like performance. Like I need to try to maybe I need to try to listen to some comedy podcasts or something like that. But typically I am more of like a training performance type podcast. But a couple of my favorite ones are RX Radio. That's if you know the Prescript guys, uh the Muscle Doc, Dr. Jordan Shallow, like I think they do a really good job. I like, especially when it comes to like training podcasts, I need a good balance of like banter, but also like good information. Like,
What we try here.
yeah, which is what we try here. I feel like we still working on the good information part.
Good at the banter though. We got
Yeah,
good
really
bits.
good at the banter, guys. Give us some credit. Like that's where there's some podcasts where it's like, damn, dude, they always have really good guests. Like they ask good questions, the information's really good, but it's just a little bit too dry sometimes. And that's like if I'm gonna listen to a podcast like consistently, I need both. So RX Radio is a big one for me. They usually cover some pretty good topics, and they just have like a little bit similar and different perspective on things. They're chiropractors by trade, but they very much do work in the performance space, working with a lot of pro athletes and stuff. Um, so that's a big one for me. One that I just started listening to, just because I started reading his book Strength Deficit by Tim Karen, his performance health podcast. He's had a lot of really good guests on there, and I think I've only listened to a few episodes, but like a lot of really good guests, and kind of does a good job of like he'll have like a topic for the podcast, but like they won't really get into like it'll kind of be like, all right, like they'll go wherever they want to go like early in the episode and then kind of tie it back to like, okay, let's get into this topic. And it's not super strict and structured, which I like. And it's been, I've only listened to a few episodes, but I've really been liking that one lately. This one is a little bit it's a lot different actually. So there's this podcast called Dreaming Spanish that was recommended to me by my Spanish tutor actually. So long story short, uh, started to learn Spanish because I was in the DR. Decided to keep up with it because I'm like, well, I learned this much. I don't want to just like lose it. So, and it's just like it's a good like challenge, and it's something different outside of performance. Would recommend, if you want to learn a different language, it's definitely a good challenge, and it's something just a little bit different, just to challenge your brain. But basically, it's the topics aren't as important as just like it's a good podcast to learn if you're beginner or like kind of like intermediate. They speak a little bit more slowly and clearly, and then obviously you can adjust the speed from there. And I think another thing that's cool about it is they have people they'll have different people on each time, and they'll be from different, parts of the world, different countries in Latin America or Spain. So you get to hear different types of accents, which is, if you hear people from, the Dominican Republic speak versus someone from Mexico speak versus someone from like Venezuela or Colombia speak, they all kind of have like very distinct accents. There's like different slang, stuff like that. So it's just kind of a good way to get kind of that like passive, like comprehensible like input, which is a big part of like learning new languages. Obviously speaking is very important, but also understanding people when they speak, at a regular pace. That's super important. So that's been a big one for me. There's ones that I go to every once in a while that it's mostly just like if I'm feel like I need a little bit more insight or need some help with a certain topic. Like Cal Newport does a podcast. I believe it's called Deep Questions. I'm a big fan of his work, especially his books, Deep Work and So Good They Can't Ignore You. When I feel like I'm just like, dude, I'm doing way too much. I feel frazzled. I need to kind of like reel this in and focus on keeping the main thing the main thing. Like Cal Newport usually has some really good stuff on that. Um, Mark Manson, the guy that wrote the book Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, does a good podcast. His are usually a lot longer, but pretty like kind of like no bullshit self help stuff. Um, Same thing with like Modern Wisdom. Every once in a while, that's a very mainstream one, but like I feel like
Dude,
Chris Williamson is a what's that?
I really enjoy Modern Wisdom.
Yeah.
I believe I know what you were going to say, and that he's a very good interviewer.
Yes. Yes. He asks really good questions.
And he
Yeah.
prompts. He
He
prompts
prompts
like an
well.
active discussion, which is really nice. Like one of my all-time favorite ones that or two of them actually, he did one with Matthew McConaughey, and would just kind of throw a nugget and watch McConaughey talk.
Mhm.
Um, but I loved Chris Williamson when he did his Chris Bumstead interview.
Yes. I was just gonna say I like the Chris
That
Bumstead episode.
the Chris Bumstead episode was incredible. It was like kind of like a lot on gratitude, but like very based in the being thankful for the struggle that you get
Mhm.
versus it almost like the flipping the thought process of, man, this stinks, I hate this sucks, this is hard, versus like, I'm grateful for this because I get to yield the results of it. And he talks a little bit about like gratitude towards his relationships in life, and his entire development through becoming, was it 6-time Mr. Olympia now,
Yeah, 5 or 6.
5 or 6, but like
Retired.
the entire like aspect of that, and like the work, the thought process, the training, and everything into that. You know, I think sometimes like those are like, you don't have to listen to that every single day, but like throwing those in, like it does make you kind of question your thinking a little bit. Not to get super into think again, but stuff like that I think is really important.
Yeah. I like one thing I like about Sebum in particular is like he's very relatable and down to earth, and that's like it's cool when you see
Someone at the
people
top.
like that. Yeah, like people like that who are like seem like they're on top of the world in a given field, and you're like, oh damn, they're just like me. Like
Guy.
they still have, yeah, he's just a dude. Like he still has like problems, albeit different than mine, but problems all the same. Um,
Hmm.
ooh, speaking of that, there's one that I haven't listened to in a while, but I know you're a big fan of as well, and that's the Founders Podcast.
What were you gonna say?
Super, yeah, super good stories. Founders Podcast. They just go over like founders of different famous companies and kind of like their whole story. He has some really good episodes on Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and just a lot of other ones too. And I believe he has a new, like a kind of a different spinoff of that podcast where he's interviewing like these founders, like live of like still living founders, which is really cool. That guy is very, like, you can definitely tell he does his research, puts a lot of time and effort into the episodes. Um, I really like just learning about people like that, whether it's, like he's done some episodes on the people like Christian Dior and like Cristobal Balenciaga, like fashion designers to like Enzo Ferrari to like Musk, Jobs, um, Bill Gates, and just kind of like all over the place. But basically, like the theme is like these people who created something great and kind of like their process towards it, and then he'll kind of like put nuggets in there about like, hey, like this is like one thing that I feel like pretty much all these founders have. This is the character trait that they all have. This is the one thing they don't do. This is like the one thing they do. This is a common theme that a lot of them share, which I think is super, super cool.
You do.
Yeah, do.
See, we're good with the bits.
Yep. So Founders Podcast is another really good one.
This one is another comedy one, but Small Town Murder.
Small Town Murder.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you I didn't listen to that every time I'm on a long road trip. Two comedians, smaller time comedians, started doing this podcast, and now I think they do this full time, like only the podcast. They pick like a small town, find a murder in it. I'm talking like they'll do hours of research on what happened, the court case itself, the story that happened. They'll research the town, the population, everything. So they have you can go up to like an episode that's like 3 hours and you're just enveloped in this story. But incredible nonetheless. And it's hilarious. It's good, but informative as well. And it's like some of these stories are just absolutely insane. Like if anyone wants to hear one of the worst ones that nobody would ever think to happen, just find the Baraboo, Wisconsin episode. And I always love like places that I've gone to or like lived around, and I'm like, let me find all those. But that is a horrific story from start to finish. But yeah, I do have a couple rapid fire things that I want to touch on. Basically a this or that going into the end of this episode. All right. I got to start off with the bang here. This or that. Coffee or an energy drink?
You go energy drink. That one's tough.
Obviously, of course, a squat day or a hinge day. Not an upper body, a hinge day.
I like a hinge day. I like them both, but I'll pick the one that I'm a little bit better at.
Tempos or long duration running?
Long duration running. Yep.
Yeah.
I knew. I was expecting that reaction.
This one's going to suck, but I feel like it's pretty easy. Elite training partner or elite training playlist?
Partner. Ideally both.
Ideally both. Elite training partner or not always elite, but good group?
God, that's tough. I feel like I got to go with the elite partner. Quality over quantity. It's tough, though.
It is tough. Upper lower split or total body?
Upper lower.
Okay. Machines or free weights?
I'll go free weights. I love machines, though. But if I had to pick one, which I do, that's the whole point.
I feel like this one's easy for you. Structured warm-up or unstructured play?
The unstructured play. Both have their place.
Last one. Any podcast in the world or Bev Boys?
Fucking Bad Boys, baby. Let's go. Pop that top. Now that I just listed 10 podcasts that weren't Bad Boys and said how much I like them. Yeah. I thought that was a given, guys. That Bad Boys is obviously my favorite. Come on.
The number one podcast that you're not listening to.
Yeah. Let's make a meme about that.
For real. Oh. Should we wrap this bad boy up?
Yeah, that was a good shit. Yeah, guys, as always, really appreciate you tuning into the show. We've been doing this, dude. We're coming up on 3 years here in January. We're like 2.5 years into this guy. Is that right?
That's right, dude.
Yeah, 2.5 years, over 100 episodes. We've been pretty consistent given like our circumstances. Obviously, we can always do better, but we really do appreciate you taking the time. This is something that we just carve out of some extra time that we happen to have. I'm busy, Brian's busy, but we do like coming together, chopping it up, having some guests on. So stay tuned. Bedboys.com if you want to support the boys with some merch. Bedboys.tv is our Instagram. You'll find our personal Instagrams there as well if you want to check that out. Do we need to get a review on that white haze? You already know I love the iced tea lemonade. It's a banger. But let's hear this review.
White haze. This is as close as you can get as to White Monster, but with 300 milligrams of caffeine. As I think it's the only thing that is even remotely comparable. And for that, if this had the scratch marks instead of the helmet on there, this would be so far up. But I'm giving it a solid 8.7 because it is diesel and it tastes like a White Monster. The only thing I would prefer is that this was a white can with scratches on it that just said, Monster Ultra, maybe Extreme on the bottom. The mental hang up is messing with me, but so good. It's literally the flavor. Just add extra caffeine, dude. It's so good. I'm all in.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, as always, folks, like I said, thanks for watching the show. We will see y'all next time.
Peace.